Hi, AP Psychology students, and welcome back. Today we are continuing our discussion of neural communication, and we are turning our focus to those little teeny guys that do all the work sending the messages, our neurotransmitters. So what we're talking about today aligns with College Board Objective, explaining how the basic processes of neural transmission is related to behavior and mental processes. And as you can see over right next to it, it's got all the neurotransmitters that you need to know for the AP test listed under essential knowledge. The essential questions that we're going to be focusing on today in order to get at that objective are: what are the functions of different neurotransmitters in our nervous system? How are neurotransmitters either excitatory or inhibitory for a cell? And how do chemicals from outside the body impact neurotransmitters? So you should be very familiar with this diagram by now. As you can see, we've got our cell body, and it's got the nucleus and the dendrites attached to it, the axon, the myelin sheath covering it, all the way down to the terminal buttons. And then you've got that magnified view of the synapse where you have your reuptake, transporters, the receptor sites, the neurotransmitters. Now, these neurotransmitters are the focus of today, right? So dozens of different neurotransmitters are found all over the brain and body, okay? We're only going to be learning about a handful of them. There are many more that we don't discuss. Not all neurotransmitters work in the same way at every connection. So a lot of neurotransmitters have multiple jobs, and what they do depends on the location of where it's being released. There are certain pathways in the brain for each neurotransmitter, and those pathways in the brain then determine what kind of action that neurotransmitter has in that place. And it's important to remember that although we talk about the neurotransmitters individually, that for the most part they all interact and they do different things at different synapses, and some are on, some are off, all this kind of thing, in order to kind of change the way that we act, the way that we think, our hunger, our feelings, all the different things that we experience on a daily basis are directly connected back to these neurotransmitters. So the first neurotransmitter that we're going to learn about is acetylcholine. I'm going to present each of the neurotransmitters in a chart like this, so if that makes sense for you in your notes to put them in a chart form, that's what we'll have going forward. So acetylcholine, that's how you say that nice long name with all of those consonants in it, right? And the big function of acetylcholine is muscle action and then memory and learning. And the final category of this chart here is any condition that's a result of either undersupply or oversupply, right? Undersupply is being illustrated by a down arrow, and oversupply is being illustrated by an up arrow. So in this case, if they find that if you have an undersupply of acetylcholine, particularly the neurons that receive acetylcholine, that is connected to Alzheimer's. Now, it's not like if you have lack of acetylcholine, you get Alzheimer's, right? Nothing is that simplistic, but these are the connections that we've found while researching the nervous system. Dopamine is the next neurotransmitter. This neurotransmitter is really connected to the reward pathway. So if you think about any kind of addictive behavior or wanting to do something over again or something feeling really good, that is the dopamine neurotransmitter. It's also involved in learning, paying attention, motivation, and it's kind of like that little it lights up and kind of motivates you to do something again. So for example, if you're eating a delicious cheeseburger, you might release dopamine, and that tells your body oh, I should have a cheeseburger again because this is amazing. If you have too much, an oversupply, that is linked to schizophrenia, and not enough, an undersupply, that is linked to Parkinson's. Serotonin is the next neurotransmitter, and it controls mood, hunger, sleep, and sexual arousal. And if you do not have enough of this, or if there is an undersupply of it for any reason, that we have found is linked to depression. Norepinephrine is another neurotransmitter in our nervous system, and its focus is alertness and arousal. So you notice I have arousal for both serotonin and norepinephrine, but they're different. So serotonin is sexual arousal, and norepinephrine is alertness, arousal, right? And what they find is that an increase or an oversupply in this could lead to anxiety disorders. An undersupply could be connected to different mood disorders. All right, next we have glutamate. So glutamate is a little bit different than the rest of the neurotransmitters we talked about because this neurotransmitter, well, one, it's the most common one in the brain. And when we think about a function, really one of the biggest functions of glutamate is an excitatory neurotransmitter. So what does that mean? That means its job is to facilitate messaging, right? To excite cells and to make sure that they send the message. This is very important in things like thinking and memory, but it's used all over the brain for all sorts of things as an excitatory neurotransmitter. If you have an undersupply of this in your brain, it can be related to migraines or seizures. And GABA, now GABA is like the opposite of glutamate in that it's the major inhibitory neurotransmitter. So the major job of this neurotransmitter is to slow a message down or even stop a message from sending, kind of depending on where it is, the location, all those things. It is a calming neurotransmitter. And if you don't have enough of this one, it could also lead to seizures. It could lead to insomnia. Endorphins are responsible for the perception of pain. Generally, we think of endorphins as like when your endorphins are like pumping through your system, you don't maybe realize or notice pain in the way that you would otherwise. They tend to like prevent pain, and they are released during aerobic activity. A related condition, not necessarily a condition, but something that kind of an effect of having an increased amount of endorphins in your system can be this runner's high. So this sensation of like your body like overcomes the pain and you kind of feel like you're on top of the world when you're doing this aerobic activity. Endorphins are very closely linked to opioids, which we think of as like painkillers like morphine. And so that's kind of the role is that they try to prevent pain in your body. That's different than substance P, which is our final neurotransmitter. And the role of this neurotransmitter is not to create pain, but for you to feel pain. So this like gives you that pain, that perception of when something is painful. And it also is connected with our immune response. And if you have too much, an over supply of substance P, that can lead to chronic pain condition. All right, so this diagram is here because I wanted you to be able to see how two different neurotransmitters, so we have dopamine in the orange and serotonin in the red, how each of those have specific and unique pathways in the brain, and their pathways overlap, right? So like I said, they impact each other, but each has specific pathways and it stays on those pathways and impacts those neural connections kind of in those areas exclusively. All right. Finally, I want to talk about how drugs or other chemicals from outside the body can impact the role neurotransmitters play inside of our body. So there's really two types of kind of outside influences that chemicals can have. So the one is to increase the messaging of the neurotransmitter, and now those chemicals are called agonists, right? So they either mimic the production, like they can look just like the neurotransmitter, they can make the nerve cell release more neurotransmitters, they can block the suction of the neurotransmitter, and any of those things will then increase the amount of neurotransmitter or increase what your body and brain thinks is the amount of the neurotransmitter or the messages of that neurotransmitter. The opposite of that then is antagonists. So antagonists are outside chemicals that either decrease or prevent the action of a neurotransmitter. How do they do this? They can block production, they can prevent the release, they can also, like, they fit, it's interesting, they like, if you look at this graphic here, you'll see that the green agonists like fit right in, right? Like they're a perfect copy. Well, the red antagonists, they fit, but not completely. So they fit enough to block the real thing, but not enough to get the message sent. And here's another like graphic that I thought was kind of a nice way to think about it. So if you think about a lock and a key, like a neurotransmitter and a receptor site, so an agonist is like a hairpin. It'll work and it'll also turn the lock. And an antagonist is like a tree branch. It'll go in, but then it breaks the lock and you can't use it, right? So that's all for now, AP Psychos. Make sure that you can answer these essential questions. And remember, psychology is flippin' awesome.